Okay. Okay, I want to welcome everybody to session 296 of Faith and Calm. And the reason I'm starting is I want to tell everybody to stay tuned for the second part because I have such a story that I've almost never had the privilege of telling such a story, and I confirmed it with people who were the source of the story. Okay, thank you so much. And now here's the explanation.
All right. Welcome to Faith and Calm, class number 296. I also have a good story. I don't know if it competes with hers or not. I haven't heard her story. She's heard this story before. So the topic that we're trying to deal with is that, it looks like we're on the brink of Moshiach coming. There's so many miracles that have happened in the big world, and not necessarily everybody's personal lives, but certainly the changes are dramatic with respect to Israel. I mean, it's always been all alone, and it's not all alone right now. Yeah, it's just a lot of enemies out there, but boy, knock off one country after another country, and so forth like that. It's really quite amazing. And so we thinking like it's right around the corner, something's going to happen. And when we have all these rabbis telling us, these are great signs, and it's disappointing. It's disappointing, especially when you see things go in the opposite direction occasionally, and it doesn't seem like it's going so well. And there's lots of we can always find good reasons why to be pessimistic and so forth. And so, what I'm going to deal with today is a talk from Rabbi Reuven Wolf, and he opened up a sefer somebody sent him this by the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, and it's an unusual mimer because it's really just stories, but it's a doozy. It's really a doozy. And it really hits the mark of what we're seeing right now, the current issues that we have in our personal lives, and keeping our enthusiasm, our faith, our calm going, and also, and seeing, progress in things, and be able to how to look at this whole situation. So stand tuned. This is really about keeping one's faith, even though you think like it's, wow, I'm losing it all and I'm getting depressed and so forth like that. How do you really, really see? How do you look at this and understand the bigger picture? So the Tzemach is analyzes a famous Gemara, Bava Metzia, page 86, which, interesting enough, this is the year 86, 5786. So it actually fits into it at the beginning of the page A of that. And it's an odd story. And if you've never read one of these unusual stories in the Gemara, so you'll notice that this story gets stranger and stranger as it goes on, and you're going, what are we dealing with here? It's related to this week's parsha. It's related to this whole idea of tsaras, of leprosy. But it's called leprosy. It's not. It was a skin disease, right? You had a white spot on your hand, or your skin somewhere like that, and then and then you didn't have to have a pink spot in the middle. If either it had a white hair or a pink spot, if a pink spot, healthy spot in it, or if it had a white hair, then it would be considered tsaras, and you would be put into quarantine, exile. So, and just to give you a little bit of background, because you're going to need this and so forth, the law goes as follows that we learn. If you have to show it to a Kohen, and if you tell him, hey, first there was a white spot, and it was followed by the white hair, then that's Tame. He's declared impure. But if it happened the opposite direction, it's completely kosher. You're not a problem. Go right ahead. That's not the disease we're talking about here. Um, and uh, and the issue is what happens if the guy comes in, he says, I don't know which one. I don't know. I wasn't paying attention, and now I've got both, and I don't know. All right, so that's the what we're dealing with here. So the story in the Gemara page, look it up. You can read it word for word from what I'm telling you here. It goes as follows. There was a Rav Kahana, and he said, that my teacher, the Rabba Bar Nachmani. Now, Rabba Bar Nachmani was one of the greatest rabbis of the time of the Gemara in Bavel, in Iraq. He had a huge yeshiva in a city called Pumbedita. There was the other one was in Sura. These were two competing yeshivas, but he had the bigger one and the more famous one. And many of the greatest rabbis who finalized the Gemara, Rava, Ravashi, and so forth, they went to his yeshiva. See, he was called Rabba, the big guy, Rabba Bar Nachmani, Anyway, he had maybe 400, 500 people, and in his yeshiva there in Pumbedita. But he had some enemies, the Gemara continues, and they didn't like him. I guess he was a tough guy, and he wasn't bending easily. Some rich people got mad at him, and so somebody slandered him to the government. And how did they do that? So they said, the king is losing money on his taxes. What do you mean? And he said, well, because twice a year, Rava would have what they call a Yarchikala, would have big open public meetings where he would explain before Passover and Nisan, and also before Tishrei, the laws of that time. And thousands of people came. 12,000 men would come at least each time. And what would happen would be that the tax collectors would come around the houses and the guys weren't home. So nobody was there to pay the taxes. So he said the king is losing money because of this guy. 2 months of taxes are not being paid by 12,000 people. It's a lot of money. King was not happy at all. No, he sent his agents to go arrest Rabbah. Rabbah got word of it and he started hiding and he went to different towns undercover. First, he went to Akka, then he went to another town, another town. He went to 7 different places, it says, and eventually he ended up back in his hometown in Pupatea, hiding out in an inn. I guess he wanted to see his family. It doesn't say what exactly the story was, but there he was. He was hiding in the inn. Now, here's where the story starts getting a little bit wild. So there came one of these FBI men, the G men, as Rabbi Wolf says, to that inn, and he sits down. It was a Jewish-owned inn, turned out, and he didn't know that Rabbi was there, and he orders 2 drinks. So they bring him 2 drinks at the table. Now, you probably don't know this. I didn't know this, but I don't know if you're a woman, you probably know these rules. In those times, the idea of demons was more a problem, spiritual demons and so forth. And you didn't do certain things because it could attract the evil eye. For example, I don't know if you cook eggs. You ever cook eggs in an egg pot, right? They always tell you don't put an even number of eggs in the pot. Use an
Right.
odd number. You shouldn't use pairs. Pairs are considered to be a dangerous thing and so forth. So they gave him 2 drinks. And he's not Jewish. So, they gave him whatever. They didn't mean anything. But he takes the 2 drinks. He has the 2 drinks. And then he looks around behind him and his neck gets stuck backwards. His head is facing backwards. And it's like, because the demon got a hold of him and so forth. And he's in pain. And the owners of the inn are really scared because, it's going to get back word to the king. We did something. We did, something terrible to him and so forth. So they run to Rabbah and say, what can we do? I mean, we didn't mean anything here. We weren't trying to hurt the guy. So Rabbah says, simple, pimple, easy answer. Just give him another drink. I'm going to make 3.
Even it out. Okay, whatever.
Yeah, he won't have the
Uneven it out.
enough. And sure enough, they did it. And he was helped. And he looks around and he says, somebody really smart must have given this advice here and so forth. I think he's hiding here in this inn. And he starts searching for him. And eventually they do find Rabbah. And he tells Rabbah, I'm not turning you in because you just saved my life. I have a lot of credit to you. In fact, even if they tell me they're going to kill me, I won't give up your location. The problem is I have worried is, and that is these guys are really, really desperate and they're not above torture. And torture, I don't know if I'll be able to survive. But anything else, I'll do whatever I can not to give you in. The Gemara sort of jumps a little bit and says now Rabbah was captured. I don't know. Was he tortured? Did they find him another way? It doesn't really say. The story just jumps at that point, and he was taken to the king, and he was thrown into prison in a cell, and there he is. He doesn't want to be there, and he prays to Hashem for a miracle. And you know what? A miracle happens. And the wall of the prison falls down and he walks out. Okay. All right. He doesn't go back to the inn. He goes to a place, a good place to hide would be in this. There was a nearby swamp, I guess. He goes there. He sits on a stump of a palm tree and he's learning. Okay. This is the Gemara. This is how it works. Okay. Now the story shifts scenes in the middle of the story and it goes to Shemayim. And it says, the yeshiva Shomayla, the heavenly yeshiva, is sitting there at the same time, and they've got a debate going on. What about what we told you earlier about this idea of tsaras? Is that if a white hair comes first, followed by a white spot, that's not kosher. That's okay. If it's a white spot followed by a white hair, that would be tsaras. But what do we do in the case of a suffix? What if the guy doesn't know the solution? He doesn't know whether it came first or not. So
Can
the
you can you can you slow down for a second? When you're talking about
mm,
coming first, you means like first one thing,
yeah,
like
yeah,
a patch shows up on your arm,
yeah, yeah.
and
You're
then
on it.
and then a hair grows out of the white spot.
Yeah, or the white gray, one of the black hairs starts turning white or something like that, and so forth. So first was white, and the skin starts turning white. It's not flush colored. And then in that same area, one of the hairs that are on your skin, and so forth, which is normally dark, all of a sudden turns white. And that's considered tsaras. But like I said, the Gemara has a question. It doesn't know if it's a suffix, if it's a doubt. What are you supposed to? Which one is it? Is he tahar or not tahar? So the yeshiva is arguing, and finally the yeshiva says, "Oh,
Yeshiva of Mila.
the yeshiva Shalmaila in heaven."
Yeshiva
The yeshiva of Mila says, this is a law of the Torah, Doraisa. It's not a Durabanan. In situations of biblical laws, we're always machmir, we're strict, and therefore we say he's tameh. The only issue happened to be the God who comes to the yeshiva occasionally was listening to. And God came in and he said, nope, it's tahar. And this started a whole fight up in the heavens and so forth. God is saying tahar, but the yeshiva says, but we can't, logically, we can't do anything else, I mean, this is your laws, and we're the majority here. So there's this argument going on between God and the yeshiva. Now, how did this happen? I don't know, but that's what the Gemara is saying. There was the debate going on in the yeshiva Shomayla. Finally, they decide they need somebody to make it to reconcile the two. Who's going to make the decision? So a voice comes out and says, Rava is unique. He says he's unique in the laws of tsaras, in leprosy, and also in oholos, in tame buildings and so forth that you go into and so forth. He knows it backwards and forwards. We'll ask him. He'll make the decision for us. The only problem is he's on Earth. They need him up there. So they send an agent down to go and get him. And the guy goes down. Who goes? How do you get a person to your heaven anyway? They send the Malach HaMavos. They send the Malach HaMavos, the angel of death. He comes down. The problem is he wants to bring Rava up, but Rava is busy learning. Rava was learning all the time. He was one of these guys that never stopped learning. So he can't take him. Right. Well, he does. He has a mission, so he knows he has to fulfill this mission. He's learning. He can't take him up. Yeah. 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 So the Mavas isn't going to give up his job there and so forth. So he comes up with a trick, just like with King David and so forth, and he starts making a rustling noise in the marshes there and so forth, like there's a whole bunch of horsemen coming. And the rabbi hears this, and he gets scared, and he says, "I don't want to be captured by these people. I'd rather die than go back to that prison again." And that was a mistake. He shouldn't have. He said that. And when he said that, then the Malach HaMavos had his opportunity and he started to take him back. But before he died, he said the words, Tahar, Tahar, pure, pure. So that made the decision in the Yeshiva Shomayla. Now, you might think that that's the end of the story, but that's not the end of the story.
No.
The Gemara goes on. It goes on. It says, the people in his yeshiva were worried. What? They were worried. What happened to their rabbi? Rava was there. Ravashi was there. They were all worried about what happened. And at that point in time, a note floats down from Shemayim and tells them the following. He says, your teacher, Rabba Bardachmeni, he has been invited to come up to the Yeshiva Shalmayla to make a decision, and you won't find him anymore on the earth. So they realize from this note that he passed away, and they go out to try and find him. And they know, they seem to know that the swamp was a good place to find him, but they don't know where. It's a big swamp. So they see a flock of birds over in one section, and Rafa and Ravashi go over there, and sure enough, they find his body. They bring it back. They bury him, and they have a hesped, a velos. They eulogize him for 3 days. He was like one of the greatest rabbis of the generation. He was the rabbi of the generation. When they're finished, they're all ready to go home. But they after 3 days, another note falls down and says, from heaven and says 3 days is not enough. If you go home now, you're going to be all excommunicated. You have to continue to hesped him. So they continue for another 4 days. It goes on for until 7 days. And then another note, the third note falls down from heaven, and it says, you're all free to go back home again. So, and then you thought this was the end of the story. But no, it's not the end of the story. The end of the story is as follows. There happened to be an Arab riding a camel. Now, this Arab and the camel happens many times in the Gemara, and he was traveling by the side of a river called the Pumpa, and a huge wind came and picked up not only him, but picked up him on top of the camel and took him and the camel together and threw him to the other side of the river. And so then he goes and he says, "Hi, Mai, what happened here? Something must have gone on." And then they tell him, I don't know. The Gemara doesn't say who they are. It's like, these are like these certain gas stations that the Arabs stop in, and they inform him of what's happening in heaven. And they tell him, they say to him, they say, listen, the great Jewish sage Rava passed away, and that is why this huge wind came into the world. And so he looks up to Shemayim and he says, Rabbona Sha'olam, God, you own the entire world, and everything is in your control. And Rava is yours, and you are Rava's. You are together as one. How can you possibly take him away from this world when you and him are all so close together? And that, strangely enough, that's the end of the Gemara. And of course, it's full of questions at this point in time. So let me give you how the Tzemach Tzedek explains it. He says as follows. He says, listen, here's what the story is telling you. First off, you have to know the following, and that is, what is this business of the yeshiva Shamayla are getting an argument with Hashem? It's Hashem's Torah. What are you telling Hashem what it means? But the answer is as follows: the yeshiva Shamayla, these are great intellect, souls, and so forth, and angels, and they have to operate according to the logic and the reasoning of the Torah, which God gave. But God is the author, and God created logic too. And therefore, God is not limited and restricted to the level and the logic that goes inside of the Torah. So he can say, I meant this, and this is really what it means, even though the logic points in one particular way. Okay, now, why is that an important point? So the Tzemach Tzedek connects it. He says this word, suffix, doubt, is not a Hebrew word, and therefore it only appears in one place in the entire Tanakh. In all of the 24 books of the Bible, it only appears in one place, and it's in here, in Eicha, at the end of Eicha, and it says, and it's only in the Targum, in the translation, and it says as follows, it says, Yusomi hayinu ve'ein avi mahos kalamanot. Our father, we are orphans. It's Lamentations. It's Eicha. We say on Tisha B'av. We are orphans because we don't have a father, and our mothers can become widows. So the Targum, the translation, Carmen Yonasan says the following. He says, what does this say? It's saying that we feel in time of Saras is an idea of exile. You're exiled at that time. Tisha B'av, this is all about exile. At the time of exile, we feel like our father has gone overseas and that we're orphaned and nobody's taking care of us. And not only that, not only do we feel that way because the exile is going on so long, but the Shekhinah, our mother, also feels like she's abandoned and God is never coming back. And why do we feel this way? Because what it says at the end, it says, because you have completely and utterly rejected for us. Now, what is that referring to? What do you mean we rejected us? So there are two kinds of feelings of loss. The Targum says it's a suffix whether God is coming back. It's a suffix because you can be angry at a person and then the relationship, but you get over your anger sometimes. But if somebody is completely disgusted with the other person, it's not necessarily going to happen that's going to turn around. So we're looking at this and we're saying, listen, and so forth. This idea of saras, what is this white business and so forth on the skin? It means that there's no life there. And when there's no life, and when there's no feeling of joy of life and stuff like that, and when there's emptiness, then all sorts of things, blood sucking negative forces can come in, and they suck the life out of you through that white hair. That's what the idea of saras is. Like when you have Rabbi Wolf was saying, he's making a new building and they're under construction. And because it's empty and abandoned, therefore, all sorts of people get in there, right? Graffiti and all sorts of other damage and vandalism and so forth. When people are home and when life is there, nobody bothers you because they stay away. When you have life and when you have enthusiasm, when you're excited and so forth, then these forces can't get a hold of you because it's repelled by it. The sense of life keeps things away. We are worried in Gullus that God has given up on us and that, we're rejected permanently. And we feel that, maybe it's really right. And actually, the Beit HaMikdash, one of the laws at Saras is that if a building gets Saras, right, it has to be destroyed. So we feel that the temple was destroyed and God has actually rejected us because there's a Saras in our building because we weren't behaving properly, and God has abandoned us forever. And the answer here that the Tzemach Tzedek says is no. No, 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 no. That's our impression of it. But God is certainly going to, when he says tahar, tahar, he's saying, listen, logic, the Yeshiva Shamayla has a logic. And it says, what? There are good reasons why the Jews are in exile and why they were put in and why we are suffering. And God says, I'm the author. I made creation. I created you. I created this world. I want this result. And Rava is connected into that level of reality that goes beyond the logic of the Gemara and says Tahar Tahar also. That's what the Arab was saying. He's saying, you know what? It's not, no matter how much you've convinced yourself that you are abandoned and you are lost and not getting, God is saying, I don't care. I made this. I'm above logic and I can change the situation in an instant. And that is what God is doing. So nobody knows what's going to happen next in the Middle East. Nobody knows what's going to happen next in our lives. Nobody knows. It's always full of surprises because God is above the logic and above reason and above everything else. And Rabbi Wolf finished with a story about his grandma, one of his wife's grandmother, who was a Holocaust survivor who passed away just recently. And it really illustrates the story very nicely. So she was a young girl. She was the youngest of her family. Her mother passed away when she was born. She was handed from family to family because they didn't have enough money. And she developed a very good skill at artists in making art out of potatoes and apples and all sorts of other kinds of stuff. And so when the Holocaust came, she was put in one of these concentration camps. And one of the Nazis found her and was really attracted by her talent with her hands. And you would give her all sorts of food, apples and pears and other things, so she could carve it, and he would sell this stuff. And she survived on the scraps. And so she came through the entire war that way. When it was the end of the war, she was taken from Auschwitz on one of these death marches. And, if you didn't get up each morning and keep going, they would kill you. And she got so tired after a while of marching on this thing that one night she decided she was not going to get up the next day. And she made up her mind that, she doesn't care what happens. That's the finish of it. That night, a woman came to her and she's sure it was her mother. And her mother came in her dream and said, you know, Tomorrow, the Americans are going to liberate you. You have to keep going. And you know what? It's exactly what happened. So the story is as follows. Her calculations were it's finished. The Yeshiva Shomayla made its calculations and said Maas May knew its Tame was not coming, it's not coming back. And what the Tzemach Tzedek is saying about our time and about our lives and about what's going on now is God is beyond all of these calculations, even the holy calculations, even the ones that seem to us to be that way. And he actually is doing things we just don't know the timetable, and that's what drives us nuts. But you know what? It's not in our power to know how it's going, and that was the lesson from the story. And that's hopefully that's useful for keeping faith and calm. And you're can you unmute yourself? Go ahead.
Um, no, it's not a complicated question. I know that there's the Beis in Shalmala, and I know what that does. I thought I knew, but what is exactly the Yeshiva Shalmala? It sounds like the Beis in Shalmala is like the one that after a person passes away, that they
Yeah.
judge them and
Uh-huh.
right. So what is the Yeshiva Shalmala exact? I don't mean to ask
Sure.
such a because it's just because I never heard of it, and it
Yeah,
sounds to
you
me like
actually did hear
they're
it.
making a decision whether or not he's Tommy Atar.
You actually did hear it.
I thought the
Every
Kohen
time on Yom
Gadol does
Kippur,
that.
when the Chazan says before Musaf, he says that very stirring prayer, Hineni, I stand before you, very poor and worthless and so forth, and I'm going
Yeah.
to do the prayer of it. He says, B'yeshiva shel Ma'ila, B'yeshiva shel Mata, Anu Matirim, Hitpalel, Im Avonosenu. It's actually in the Yom Kippur davening. It's literally, that's part of the Kol Nidre davening. What it means, I guess they have a yeshiva there where they learn Torah and these
But they're the
cemeteries.
one that are making the decision whether he's Tommy Atar. And I thought that it's the Kohen Gadol's job. Like it's not
Well,
it's
they were discussing the law. They weren't making the decision whether somebody, an individual was. You have to show that.
right.
Right, right. Yeah, they're discussing the law and what is the situation the law should be if you don't know this of the story. If you're in doubt whether it's tame or not tame. In other words, if the exile continues on or doesn't continue on, whether the tsaras is you're thrown into isolation,
Uh,
quarantine, it's exile. So the whole idea is what is the spiritual idea of this idea that whether something if something is in doubt whether it's going to be healed or not. And so
uh-huh.
they were discussing the law and understanding the law of the Torah of it,
Oh,
not
oh, oh.
necessarily ruling on an individual case. Yeah, the individual, the person that they give it to Yirmiyahu, who wrote the book of Kinos, right? He was a Kohen. So that was one another thing that Rabbi Wolf said was, that's why it's this whole idea of a suffix and Tame and Tahar is in the Kinos book. So that was it.
All
Now,
right. Thank you.
I
I'm sorry
promised
to.
a very doozy story for my wife. I hope it's better than mine, but I thought that was a rather wild story, and I thought I would share it with
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you. Have the camera adjusted? Right.
So you know what? So it's I should have said this before, but my class that I go to on Shabbos, my friend, um, sh we're learning Shmuel Aleph, and anyway, the only reason I'm bringing it up is because there was a situation and that came up with chalitza, and the teacher brought in this idea that, well, what is, and she said, we don't like Gemara, we don't really understand like as women, and it seems a little bit of an interesting question. What if a lady has to do chalitza and she has no arms? So we
That was
all
a question
started
in the
chuckling.
class.
Why?
That was a question that was brought up. Got it.
She like was saying she just I don't know why she added it in, and it was sort of like funny, like and we as women like that don't learn, don't understand that sometimes there's Gemaras that are brought about that are like a little bit not so easy to understand. So that one was really funny because
It's a
whatever.
question. It's a question that's raised in the Gemara. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that it's like, what if
No, the
And
Gemara is extremely logical, and and
I
they
know it's
examine, yeah, they examine. And, first of all, I want to correct something. There are women who learn Gemara too, and there are
okay.
many women
Well,
who learn Gemara. It's not
not where I
just
live.
exclusively a
Whatever.
man's territory, but I understand, and it's a different kind of logic than it's like extremely logical,
It
and
was sort of like bringing
I
up a scenario. Okay, so what is a woman supposed to do if she doesn't have any
understand,
arms at all?
I understand, I
So
understand. Okay,
I shouldn't say women don't earn, whatever. Just
they learn Gemara, they learn everything. Okay, so I want
yes,
to start.
she brought it
Start.
during the class, so we
Okay,
were
good.
learning.
I want to start. I want to start if you don't mind. And I want to say that this class is in my mother's memory. This is my mother's yard site. It's at its final moments today. It was today during the day, Gimel ER, and my mother was an extraordinary person. And I think the root of why I became why the not the, yeah the root the thing that started it off was that when I was young I heard my mother survived the Holocaust, my father survived the Holocaust, and my father survived with even wilder miracles than my mother. Absolutely wild, unbelievably wild, wilder than Yehezkel Shimon's story, and my mother also, but my father never spoke. I didn't hear about my father's stories until after I was grown. But my mother, from the time I was a child, my mother told me that she told me one story very often. And she said that, in the time of the Holocaust, the Nazis had already came and liquidated her town. And she knew that, and they brought several young people to work for them in their Nazi headquarters that they had established in that town until they finished their job of liquidating the town, liquidating all the Jews. I don't know why they use that word, murdering all the Jews. So they had their headquarters there and they had these people waiting on them and cleaning and doing whatever else. And my mother was one of those people. And anyway, I'm sure I've told the story before. My mother would steal loaves of. It wasn't stealing because the Nazis took everything that the Jews had. So in the evenings, my mother would take a loaf of bread and run away, run back to the town, and give it to her family who were starving. And she kept them alive a lot longer that way. And they beat her regularly. Whenever they found out that she did that, they beat her over the head with wooden, a big wooden board. And, for the rest of her life, my mother had terrible headaches. But anyway, she kept doing it until they liquidated the town. When they finally killed everybody, then at 2 in the morning, my mother, they didn't need their helpers anymore. They didn't need headquarters in that town anymore. They can move on and do the next job that they had, the next group of Jews that they wanted to murder. And so they lined up everybody at 2 or 3 in the morning, all the Jewish people that had worked for them, the young Jewish people. And 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 uh, and there was a guy with a rifle, and my mother was at the end of the line. And my mother, at that point, she knew her parents were murdered. She figured her whole family is murdered. And she decided that, you know what? I don't really care anymore. I don't care if I live or die. If that Nazi turns his head for 1 minute, for 1 second, I'm running. If he shoots me, fine. If he doesn't shoot me, whatever. But I don't care if I live or die. Let him, you know,
Can you talk louder?
Oh, sorry, you don't hear. Okay, so my
Thank
mother,
you.
sorry, I'm gonna move the mic closer. So my mother said to herself, she said, I don't care about life anymore. I just don't know what I'm not afraid of anything anymore. I'm not afraid of dying. If that stupid Nazi turns his head for 1 second, I'm gonna run. And right after she said that in her head, there was a strong hand on her back pushing her to run. Well, the Nazi turned his head. As soon as she said that in her head, the Nazi turned his head, and my mother felt a strong hand on her back pushing her to run. And she ran, and she knew that it was her mother's hand. She knew, there was no doubt in her mind, it was her mother's hand from heaven. and she ran into, there was she ran, and there was very tall grass, and she dove into the tall grass. And the Nazi looked around and he saw there's less people. There was one person less in my line. And he said, wie ist der kleine Blonde? Wie ist der kleine Blonde? Where's the little blonde? Where's the little blonde? And nobody faked on her, thank God. And he was alone and he couldn't leave the rest of the line to get her. And so my mother lay in the tall grass, and Baruch Hashem, in the morning there was a Polish lady and who walked nearby, and she saw my mother, and my mother said, "Go to this particular non-Jew. His name is Mr. Hashofsky. May Hashem honor his memory." And she said, tell him and he will pay you money if you tell him where I am. And so this Mr. Hashofsky found out where my mother was. Mr. Hashofsky was indebted to my mother. Not my mother. He really liked my mother's father. My mother's father was a businessman. He sold water pipes, and he was extremely honest and extremely honorable. And Mr. Hashofsky was very impressed by my grandfather, and he paid for my mother to be in hiding for the rest of the war. And it was not an easy thing. My mother had to go from place to place because one family would get too scared and they would say, we're not keeping her anymore. And he'd have to find another family. And my mother hid if the Nazis came, they would lift up floorboards and my mother would hide in there like a little coffin. And anyway, that's how she survived the war. So from that story about the hand on the back, I knew that there was something more than just what we see. I knew that there was a Hashem. And years later, there was more of a possibility for me to embrace Torah because I already knew from my earliest years that there's more to life than what we see. So, so anyway, this class is dedicated to my mother, and I want to start with. I'm just going to say the four things that I always start with, which is that number one, we are an amazing time. We are in the unfolding the redemption, and I can say that with 100% clarity and positivity, and certainty, because the Lubavitcher Rebbe said it, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe is an amazing, 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 uh, amazing explainer of our times. He, first of all, he's a miracle worker, so many miracles, it's unbelievable. But even more important than a miracle worker, the Rebbe told us exactly what's happening in our time. He told us at every a juncture of time, and he told us that, he told us what different events that were happening, what would happen. He told us 64, it's going to be fine, you guys. It's going to be a miracle. And nobody else thought so. And I've told you all these things before, so I'm not going to go through them. But he knew what was going to happen ahead of time repeatedly. And the Rebbe told us that in 1991, 1992, he told us that we have entered the time of the redemption. Doesn't mean it's going to be an easy time. And there were many sages who prayed that they wouldn't be alive at this time because it's such a tumultuous time. But anyway, so the Rebbe says we are in the unfolding of the redemption, and we know that you and I are here because we have a critical role to play, and we know that we have been given all the tools we need to navigate this time. We have the Torah, which is our guidebook, and we have the mitzvahs, which are our power tools. And finally, what we're doing tonight, learning about the redemption, is the fastest way to speed it up. That's what the Rebbe explained to us. So anyway, I'm going to tell you one of the I did tell the story to Haskell Shimon. He doesn't remember that I told him, but I could. It's such a moving story that I cried several times. I couldn't speak for a while during the story. And I want to tell you before I tell the story that I confirmed the story before I told it. I confirmed it with the sources of the story. So here it is. This is a story that happened in 1988. There was a couple, and they lived in New York, and their first daughter was born in 1988. And they named, I don't know what name they named her in this. They call her in the story. They call her Shirley. You'll see that the story is documented at the end. And Shirley was a wonderful baby, but by the time she got to be, when she got to be 3 months old, she started crying hysterically. She couldn't sleep more than 10 minutes and she would cry at the top of her lungs. And it was an extremely hard time for the parents. They couldn't do anything. This kid was hysterical 24/7. If she would sleep it for 10 minutes at a time, it was an amazing thing. So finally, one time on a Thursday night, she just cried, 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 and couldn't stop crying. It was a horrible, horrible night. And the parents decided, we have to check this out. So they brought her to a hospital in New York, in Brooklyn, and and uh, and the doctors there, the emergency room, whatever, they said, babies cry. That's what babies do. And they said, no, this is not normal. There's something wrong with our child. Please check it out. So they did check it out, and she was in the hospital for 5 hours. And at the end of 5 hours, the head of pediatrics spoke to the parents, and he said, "You're right. There's something terribly wrong with your child. I'm sorry to say that she has a large tumor on her brain, and we're going to do everything we can to help your child, but you should prepare for the worst because it's not a simple story here." So they were shocked. It was a horrible, horrible thing to hear. They were absolutely shocked. And he left the hospital and then she left after him. Maybe he went to work. I don't know what happened, but she left the hospital and she went out. By this time it was Friday afternoon. And she went out into the street, the sidewalk, and a young girl comes up to her and she touches her on the shoulder and she said, "Are you Jewish?" And the woman, she couldn't even speak. She just went, and the girl gave her candles. She said, "It's Friday. It's going to be Shabbos. You can light Shabbos candles." So the woman took it, and and uh and the girl said, "Are you okay? Is everything okay?" And the woman, she couldn't really talk. She took the baby and she went and she sat down. There was a bench there. She sat down and the girl sat next to her and she said, and the woman, she was in shock from what the doctors told her. And because it was another Jew and because she was so nice to her, she burst into tears and she told her the whole story about what was happening with the baby. And the girl, her name is Minna. The girl said, "My name is Minna, and she came from South America." She said, she came from, where did she come from? She, yeah, she's from Mexico. Sorry. She said, "I'm from Mexico, but right now I'm learning in yeshiva, in a women's yeshiva in Crown Heights. And there's a great rabbi there, and he does miracles. And you can come with me on Sunday morning. He meets people, he gives them dollars to give to charity, and he gives them blessings at the same time. Everything is going to be okay. Just meet me. I'll take you there. Meet me, and we'll go for dollars, okay?" And the mother just nods and she gives the girl asks for her information, and the mother gives her her phone number and they part. And the mother knows full well she is not going to Brooklyn. She is not going to get dollars from some rabbi. She doesn't believe in rabbis. She doesn't believe in miracles. And she has big problems on her shoulders. So anyway, um, she and anyway, she goes home, and that and she stays with the baby all Shabbos in the hospital, all Saturday in the hospital. Saturday night, her husband came to relieve her, and she went home, and there was a message on the answering machine from Mina, and Mina said, "Don't forget, tomorrow we're going for dollars to the Rebbe," and the mother didn't call back. She knew she's not doing anything like that. And then in the morning, at 8 in the morning, Mina called, she left another message. It's, "Don't forget, today we're going to the Rebbe. Do you need a ride? Do you need directions?" And and so the woman thought about it. She thought, "What's my problem? The doctors don't expect my daughter to live to her first birthday. Ah, I'll go. Maybe a miracle. Maybe I'll start believing in miracles." So she met Minna outside of 770. They waited for hours. It was incredibly bitterly cold. and it was bitterly cold, and the mother said, no, no, I'm going home. This doesn't make any sense. It's snowing, it's freezing. And Minna said, no, you're staying. He can help you. The Rebbe can help you. So finally they get, after 2 hours, they get up to the Rebbe, and they get up to the Rebbe, and the mother tells the Rebbe, my daughter Shirley is incredibly sick, and the doctors don't think she's going to live. She has a very large brain, a tumor on her brain. Um, and 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 the Rebbe asked for the daughter's name, the full her Hebrew name, and he gave her $2. He gave her one for Shirley and one for her. And and by the way, this mother, she actually was born in, yeah, the mother was born in South America, but she came to America when she was a toddler. She had absolutely no accent. Nobody knew that she came from South America. And when she asked the Rebbe for a blessing, she spoke in perfect English because she's been here since she was a toddler. And the Rebbe gave her dollars, and the Rebbe looks at her and says in perfect Spanish, "Next time you come, bring the baby, bring your baby." And she's like, and she goes away, and she goes out of the line, and Mina's waiting for her already outside. And Mina said, "How was it? How was it?" And the mother says, "Did you tell him I speak Spanish?" And the girl didn't even know that she spoke Spanish. And so she something opened up in her. It maybe I can trust this person. Maybe this is a person I can turn to. And she collapsed into Mina's arms and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed, sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. Anyway, the next Sunday, when there was dollars again, she went to the hospital, and she got permission from the head nurse to take Shirley away for a couple of hours. And she took Shirley to 770. And when they got to the Rebbe, this time she didn't even need Minna. She knew exactly where to go and what to do. And when she brought the baby to, it's freezing out there. Shirley has a coat on and all these, and the Rebbe stuck $8 into he put $8 on top of the baby's coat, in the pockets, in everywhere. And the mother was like, oh, she didn't even know what was happening. She just knew, oh, my baby has gotten so many blessings. It's good, it's good. And so um things got worse, and the doctors told her she has to have brain surgery. We have to do a major operation. There is no help for her except for surgery. And as we said in another story, brain surgery is very, very, very dangerous. You don't know what's going to happen with brain surgery. So when the mother heard that, the mother herself went back to 770 every day. The Rebbe only gave dollars on Sunday, but she went back. Maybe I'll see the Rebbe. He'll come out of 770. He'll come out of somewhere, his office. And she hung around, and she would just wait for a wave from the Rebbe, a smile from the Rebbe. And now she took it and she clung to it. And and it gave her strength. And so meantime, the doctors were pushing her, and they said, now we have to do surgery now. And she didn't want to do surgery. She believed that something is good is going to happen for her baby, and not surgery. And the husband didn't think twice about the Rebbe. He didn't have that same connection that the wife did. But the husband also didn't really want surgery, because he had a medical background, and he thought the baby was going to die. And he thought, why put her through this? It's ridiculous. Let her just put her on painkillers and let her die naturally. But anyway, the mother believed in the Rebbe's in in the Rebbe's blessings. And um and and uh, and she told the doctors, listen, I'll make a decision, but not now. Let me just wait until Sunday, okay? Wait until after Sunday. So they reserved the surgery room for Monday, and they said, okay, we'll wait until after Sunday. On Sunday, she went to 770 again, and she told the Rebbe, they want to give my Shirley surgery. And the Rebbe said, he gave her $1, and he said, give this to charity, give this to tzedakah, and your Shirley she won't need surgery. And she went back to the hospital very relieved, and she said, my Shirley doesn't need surgery. I got a big blessing from a a holy man named Lubavitcher Rebbe, and she's gonna be okay without surgery. The doctors thought she was nuts. They started screaming at her, yelling at her, accusing her of being a terrible mother, a lunatic. They threw every epithet in the world at her, and there was a Jewish doctor there, and she thought maybe he would have some sympathy, but he was as bad as the rest. And they got angry at her, just furious at her. And they said she shouldn't, she's irresponsible, and she's, this is the only way to save her child. And you ask a rabbi about the health of your baby? What is your problem? So anyway, for the next week, whenever she came to the hospital, every single doctor, nurse, technician came to her and tried to convince her, you have to help your baby. What are you doing? Anyway, they put a tremendous amount of pressure on her, and the next Sunday, she went to the Rebbe again, and she told him they're putting horrible pressure on me, and to do the surgery. And the Rebbe handed her $1, and he said, when you stand in front of the judge, ask him, tell him you want a re-examination. And she was in dollars. If you were ever in dollars, I was in the dollars line. If you're ever in the dollars line, you have your 30 seconds, and then some very nice older Jewish people push you out of the way so the next person can come because there's 1,000 people waiting. And so she was like shocked at the Rebbe's. What did he say? When I stand in front of the judge, I should ask for a re-examination. And they push her away. A few days later, she understands what the Rebbe said because there was a letter in the mail asking her to appear in court to defend herself as because they want to take custody of the baby away from her. The hospital is suing to take custody of the baby away from this lunatic. And she has to meet in court. She sends she sends a copy of the letter to the secretaries, the Rebbe's secretaries. They show it to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe, at 11 o'clock at night, the secretaries call her back and they said, the Rebbe already told you, when you stand in front of the judge, ask for a re-examination of the baby. And so she remembered, oh yeah, oh, and she was calm. Okay, Rebbe knows what's going on. And so anyway, she um she appeared in court. She appeared in court a few days later. It was just a few days later. They made a little illustration of the story. I don't know if you can see it. They made it's not going to show up. Not going to show up. Yeah, they made a little illustration. She didn't bring a lawyer. She went herself. Presumably her husband was there too, but she went herself. And they brought all the doctors and all their lawyers. They had a huge team of people to declare her incompetent. And they did a horrible smear campaign about her. They said she was a monster, she was negligent, she's not fit to be a mother. And when it came time for her to speak, she did not defend herself. She stood up and she wiped away her tears and she said, I want one thing. I want to I I I I she said, I'd like that a third party examine my baby. A third party that doesn't know me, doesn't know my baby, a third party. I want a neutral third party to examine my baby. And the judge says, why should that? There's a whole team of doctors here. Why should that be any different? She said, Judge, I can't explain. I can't explain what I've been through in the past few weeks, but please trust me that I love my baby and I want the best for my baby. And the judge said, okay, I think that sounds like a fair thing that you're asking for. And she realizes, oh, the judge is on my side. And the prosecution immediately jumps up and says, Judge, this is just a delaying technique by this lunatic woman. And the judge calls her back up to the bench again, and the judge says, if we get a third party, a neutral doctor to look at your baby, do you promise to accept whatever that third party doctor says? And she said, yes, I promise. And the judge takes his gavel. I think the mother's, I think it's an okay thing the mother's asking for. Find a third party. They found another hospital to examine the baby, and the baby was supposed to be examined at um, at 5 p.m. on a Sunday. That Sunday morning, she brought the baby to the Rebbe, and the baby put the dollar right in the baby's hand, and he touched the baby's palm with his right hand. He touched the baby's palm, and he looked at the mother and he said, "Healing is near." And after that, she went to the other hospital. Her baby got whatever the battery of tests were that they had to give the baby, and the results were not sent to her or the hospital. The results were sent straight to the judge, and they had to appear in court 4 days later. It was a long 4 days, but she clung to her trust in the Rebbe, and they appeared in court, and the judge gave them both copies of what the third party said. She's flipping through it, and she flips all the way to the end, and she sees there is no tumor anywhere in this baby's body. She is perfectly healthy. And she was like, "Oh my God." She was so incredibly happy. And the judge who did the third party doctor who was in charge of all the tests got up and testified, and he said, "I've been a doctor for 35 years now, and either there was a miracle here or this baby never had a tumor to begin with, because this baby is perfectly healthy." So they made an agreement that that the baby would go back to the first hospital every 8 weeks to check and make sure that the tumor stayed not there. It's gonna happen again. That the baby, they made a deal that the baby would have to this knocked the that the baby would she would go back with the baby every 8 weeks, and that's what happened. And obviously everything, this has to reorient itself. I'm not in control of this little camera here. Okay, good. And um and and everything was fine. At the end of 8 months, the hospital said, "We're not going to torture you anymore. She's fine. You don't ever have to bring her back here again." And they kept visiting the Rebbe. And on the girl's fourth birthday, the mother brought her back to get a blessing, to thank the Rebbe herself. And the Rebbe gave the little girl $2, and he said, "This is for your tuition to Base Rivka." Base Rivka is a Jewish learning school in Crown Heights, and and uh, and that's what happened. The mother sent her to Base Rivka. The parents sent her to Base Rivka. She grew up among from girls, and she learned Torah, and that was the and she led a full and happy and healthy life. And this story appears in a book called Abba, a Hebrew book called Abba, and the author of the story is Rabbi Moshe Orenstein. That happens to be my maiden name, Orenstein. But anyway, the story was substantiated by him, and by the research that he did, and also by the principal of Beis Rivka, Shendel Tachtel. And I called the Tachtel family, and I confirmed that this is an absolutely true story. So anyway, that's your story for today. And the point of the story is that you can trust the Rebbe. If the Rebbe says this is the redemption unfolding, just like this woman trusted the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said a bold thing, such a bold thing. Your daughter's going to be okay. She's not going to need surgery. And there was a whole hospital against him, a whole hospital against her, against what the Rebbe was saying. Oh, I forgot to tell you, the mother, on one of the
I can't
subsequent
hear her.
trips where she had to check out the baby's health, the mother the mother went into the office of the Jewish doctor, the one who had been adamant that they were crazy to listen to a rabbi, and she saw a little picture of the Rebbe on that doctor's desk. And so she knew. She didn't say anything about it, but she knew my Shirley changed the course of that guy's life. So anyway, that's the story. And I want to wish my mother and Aliyah of her neshama, and
Amen.
amen. And I'm going to turn off the recording. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to hear it. So let's see. Here, 1 second. Here.